believe BJ Penn in his prime was probably the fighter that I thought was skill-wise, the most skilled athlete, the most skilled martial artist that I ever fight. He was like the perfect fighter. He was good everywhere. He had very little weaknesses.
Every great fighter remembers the toughest matchup of their career. It could have been the night legends faced off, or an early foe that pushed them way further than they believed they would.
Gentlemen, we've gone over your instructions. I expect a clean fight. Obey my commands all times, defend yourselves all times.
So here's what some of the greatest fighters in the UFC today and in the sport's history have to say about their most difficult night at the office. How about we start things off with one of the most battle-tested warriors of all time, the great Justin Gaethje.
Who's the toughest opponent you have ever faced? I think Khabib was probably the one who I felt, even if I performed better, I'm not sure that I could have beat him on that night specifically. So that night that I fought Khabib, I would say that he was my toughest opponent to date. Who's your dream opponent? I want to fight Makhachev. He's the champ. And I do believe that is a better matchup for me than Khabib, but he's good.
It takes a lot to admit that you're probably just up against a bad matchup. But for Gaethje, he was under no illusions about how much trouble he was in as soon as Khabib Nurmagomedov took him down. Sure, he had landed a few good leg kicks on the feet and may well have had Khabib in trouble, but once that takedown was secured, the fight was basically over. From there, we move on to one of the most talented welterweights to ever do it, the Nigerian nightmare himself, Kamaru Usman.
Opponent ever to fight?
Yeah, I want to say he was probably the most complete. Yeah, he's the most complete because he could wrestle, he could strike, he has a good gas tank. You know, usually everybody else I could kind of pinpoint something about him that's might be a weakness that I could exploit and I could push for, but you know, he was probably the most complete.
That first fight that you guys fought was like crazy.
I feel like he did a lot better in the first one. Right? I feel like the second fight he really got the better of him.
He did a lot better in the first fight because of how I wanted to fight him.
Every great fighter needs a truly great opponent to help them build their legacy. And though Usman was in there with great fighters like Tyron Woodley, Jorge Masvidal, and Gilbert Burns, the saga that defined his run as champ was undoubtedly his two matchups against Colby Covington. Nate Diaz comes in next with a pick that may surprise some of you.
What was your hardest fight you'd ever say? The hardest fight you ever had?
I always say it, but there's a guy I fought named Josh Neer. He was my he's my boy now though. We're homies, but
Nate Diaz was around long before he shot to major fame after sharing the cage with Conor McGregor, and in that time he was always known to the masses as Nick Diaz's little brother. So it's fitting that he considers a former opponent of Nick's to be his own toughest challenge. Some of you might know who Josh Neer is, but he was a longtime veteran in the sport who had some damn good wins on his resume, and Nate went right down to the wire with him, earning Fight of the Night honors in the process. The former UFC lightweight champion Islam Makhachev was not afraid to give one of his toughest rivals a whole lot of credit.
Volkanovski, the toughest opponent you've ever faced?
I think so. He gave me a hard time.
Would you fight him again?
Why not? If they want, let's go. I'm ready.
He's told me that he's willing to fight you again. Do you want that fight?
Rematch?
Yeah.
Let's do it. Done. Rematch it is.
Immediately?
Immediately.
Islam ran over Alexander Volkanovski in their short notice rematch, but he definitely had a very tough time out there in their first meeting. Volk was clearly a lot more physically capable than Islam thought, and his ability to stifle Makhachev's wrestling was something that left us all a little surprised. He even dropped Islam in the final round, and though he lost a narrow decision on the scorecards, it did seem like he had the bigger moments out there. But when Islam got a second crack at the featherweight king, he didn't leave anything to the judges. Islam's longtime friend and training partner Khabib Nurmagomedov had two answers to this question for two different reasons. Although he wouldn't be drawn into naming any one particular fighter as the definitive pick,
Who would you say was your toughest opponent?
It was everybody was tough, you know. Like for example, like with Conor, he was tough too. Mental game, because sometimes mental games more tough than physical, you know. There is always gonna be some champions, with me or without me. But who cares? I'm finished now.
Khabib is never gonna give a straight answer, but the fact that he gave a shout out to his fierce rival Conor McGregor is certainly surprising. But it does make sense. Conor dragged him into the 4th round, longer than either Dustin Poirier or Justin Gaethje can manage. Remember, if you're enjoying this content, be sure to get involved by liking the video and leaving a comment. The recently retired Dustin Poirier has had more than a few years in that octagon, and it's clear who he held in the highest esteem.
That fight was, years ago. If I'm not a better fighter than I was then, I wasted years of my life. But he's right. Over the last 18 years that I've been fighting, these are the toughest style matchups for me. Guys who are heavy wrestlers, top heavy, good top control. They're able to take the fight where they want it to be, and I'm the kind of fighter who does well in the fight. And if they can slow that down and make it more of a match or a competition, I need this to be a fight.
Looking at Dustin Poirier's record is like reading a Hall of Fame nominee ballot. And over the course of his long career in the cage, he fought pretty much everyone of note from his era. But there was definitely something special about the two Dagestan destroyers who denied him from winning the belt. We're sure he feels the same way about Charles Oliveira too, but Khabib and Islam were the guys who truly fought him on their own terms. Jon Jones has barely put a foot wrong since entering the pro game, but he knows that some fights have been tougher than others.
I was fighting Dominic Reyes, and it was in round 1. He hit me with a spinning back kick to the face, and then he punched me in the stomach, and I hit the floor, and it was technically a knockdown. And he was giving me a true fucking run for my money. He was the only other person to do it to me outside of Gustafsson. And I remember thinking to myself, you may have met your match, Jon. And it was just like, hey, you've had a great career. You've done a lot of great things. This kid, he wants it. He's hungry for it. Just don't let him knock you out. Let him have it. Let the kid have it, Jon. And then I thought about that flying and never coming down. It's a decision. It's a decision to give up on yourself. And something just as clear as that other voice said, that. Not you, not today, not me, not now, Bubba.
It took a while for Jones to even admit that Dominic Reyes gave him a tough fight, but it's pretty obvious that he came the closest to actually getting his hand raised against Bones. Even great rivals like Daniel Cormier and Rashad Evans were pretty comfortably swept aside when it mattered most. We're sure he felt the same about Alexander Gustafsson following their first bout, but considering how easily he destroyed Gus in the rematch, we're sure he feels a whole lot better about their saga now. The consensus greatest UFC heavyweight of all time, Stipe Miocic, certainly is faced off against a who's who of legends in the sport.
You've been in there twice with Junior Dos Santos, a former champion, twice with Cormier. Is Cormier the toughest opponent you've ever faced?
Oh, definitely. I mean, he's definitely a great fighter. I mean, I think your next fight is your toughest opponent, no matter what. So, I think everyone has brings something different to the table that you fight. But definitely DC, he has a lot of stuff to bring, and it's gonna be a tough fight. But unfortunately, I'm coming out with the belt still wrapped around my waist here and still.
It might seem a little premature to put Dricus du Plessis in there with some of these other greats, but he's well on his way to becoming one of the very best fighters in this era.
My toughest opponent to date, well, that's a very open-ended question because there were fights that were the hardest for me. I have to say probably Adesanya was the best guy I faced in his specific area. Probably the fight I was the most nervous for. Just in terms of how good he is, he can catch you with anything, anytime. All the time I spent looking up to him and studying him because he was the benchmark, knowing what he's capable of. I think he is the best guy I've faced, and obviously if you watch that fight, it was one hell of a fight. It was a tough night at the office for both of us. And but then when you just go on pure toughness, you have to go with either Brad Tavares or Sean Strickland. Just the amount of damage they were able to take and just keep going.
Even though they pretty clearly hated each other, DDP definitely had a lot of admiration for his great rival Israel Adesanya. Izzy is one of the most technically proficient fighters to ever do it, sometimes even to his own detriment. But in there with DDP, Adesanya was having success, Make no mistake, but the determination of the South African was too much in the end, and in one swift sequence, he got the last stylebender out of there. You might be surprised at the fights that come to mind for Cowboy himself, Donald Cerrone, but tough fights come in many forms.
Who was the most difficult win? Tough one?
Yeah, kind of a toughie. My most difficult win. Probably Razor Rob McCall. That was a hell of a scrap, back and forth, back in WC days, throwing down. A couple of fights that I really liked, like the fighting Robbie Lawler. It was tons of fun, although I didn't win it, although I thought I won it. Even like the last fight with Anthony, I thought I won it, but
I thought you won it too.
Can't always, they say don't leave it in the hands of the judges. So, you just never know, man. You never know.
Cerrone's fight with Rob McCullough took place right in the middle of the WEC's glory days, and it was a hard-fought victory for him. His showdown with Robbie Lawler came a lot later in his career, but watching him weather Lawler's insane first-round burst was truly exciting. Cowboy fought them all. The legendary 170-pound GOAT, Georges St. Pierre, took a multi-pronged approach to answering the question.
Who was the toughest fight you've ever fought? The toughest fight? That I ever win? The toughest is different than the toughest guy. The tough, I believe it's Michael Bisping. The toughest fight that I had was my first fight with BJ Penn. Yeah, and I believe BJ Penn in his prime was probably the fighter that I fought was skill-wise the most skilled athlete, the most skilled martial artist that I ever fight. He was like the perfect fighter. He was good everywhere. He had very little weaknesses. The fight that I had, that I got, if you're talking about a toughest fight in terms of damage that I get the most hurt, it's my fight with Carlos Condit. I got kicked in the head and I had to go to hospital after to add a vein in my head that kind of explode when I get kicked in the head when I got the. So that's the fight that I was pretty much damage-wise the most damage with Carlos Condit. But when you say tough, it depends what you mean in terms of tough. I try to answer your question in different ways. I hope you understand. Thank you.
But what's the toughest matchup your favorite fighter ever managed to overcome? Be sure to let us know in the comments below. Enjoy this video? Be sure to smash the sub button and stick around and support the channel by checking out some of our other uploads. Thanks for watching.